Hi, my name is Clarissa Walker, and I'm the instructor for Writing 303. This is Research Slide Session number 2, and we will begin. So again, this is the MLA citation for the slide presentation, but the actual research that we are using, the MLA citation for that is in this slide presentation as well as the syllabus. Here are the key concepts that we will be addressing today. All of those are there for you to pause if you want to slow down and take some notes. So here is the research that we are focusing on today. It's Lori Grease, and it's a book called Still Life with Rhetoric, a new materialist approach to visual rhetorics. So this is our time to, as I said before, discuss visual rhetoric and how we will use visuals in this public rhetoric discussion and its place in our analysis of its operation in this public space. But Lori Grease is the scholar that we are focusing on in this particular session. So let's start with a definition of rhetorical. It's really important for us to talk about terms and defining our terms so that when we use these words, we're using them in the same way, because there are many theories and many perspectives when it comes to these common terms. So rhetorical, according to Grease, is a thing's ability to induce change in thought, feeling, and action. Its ability to organize and maintain collective formation, and a thing's power to enter into relationship with other things, human and non-human. So she is talking about the personification of a picture or like I said, a non-human thing as well as human. That will make more sense later, I promise. But basically here, we want to take note that sometimes we are limiting the definition of rhetorical to things, a thing's ability to persuade. And she is expanding on that a bit and saying it doesn't have to be intentional persuasion. It can be a thing that induces change in thought, feeling, and action. It doesn't have to overturn a government. It doesn't have to be a political speech that overturns a government. It can be a piece of art that changes the purview or changes a paradigm, changes a public's idea or way of thinking as well, because that is equally as powerful even if it's not as overt. So I think that's one of the most important pieces of what we're doing this semester is I hate to keep saying recontextualizing, but we're considering other concepts or other ways of contextualizing these concepts. Rhetorical, a thing's ability to induce change in thought, feeling, and action. Visual rhetoric. It's important to talk about visual rhetoric, especially when we're talking about public rhetoric and public writing. Visual rhetoric is visual things that act as vital actants that are constantly changing, circulating, and triggering all kinds of collective action. That will be clearer later. But in the case of Grease, it's important to know that she believes, as many of us do, that a visual thing moves through generations, it circulates, it's altered, it's used by various people with various histories and perspectives. And so it is not a stable, stagnant thing, but it is a moving thing. And we're going to talk a lot more about that throughout the semester, but consider visual rhetoric as a visual thing that is a vital actant. And it's constantly changing, circulating, and triggering all kinds of collective actions. And that's what makes it rhetoric. The fact that it's triggering change. Whether it means to be, whether it was set loose to do that or not, doesn't matter as much in this conversation. It did it. And that makes it visual rhetoric. Here we're talking about rhetorical life. the rhetorical life of a thing. So the rhetorical life, we're going to talk about the rhetorical life of the 13th Amendment on the week that you look at the documentary called 13th. Now we're talking about very, very, very old documents that still have a rhetorical life today. So the rhetorical life means that we are considering the time of the span of rhetoric's existence from the moment of production, the moment that the 13th Amendment was written, and everything that happened as a result of that artifact to today. So the production date, counting every version, all engagement and uses and influence to date. And that is the rhetorical life of that artifact, the 13th Amendment. So we talk about things in terms of their rhetorical life. We consider the generations that they've touched, engagement, interpretations, and movement of a thing's rhetorical life. It can be a photograph taken at the turn of the century and how it has been encountered multiple times and used multiple times in this conversation with Lori Grease. So the Obama Hope example is a favorite of Lori in her book. And I love this story actually because I think it's a great way to illustrate her point. So as many of you might know, maybe not, in 2008, the Obama Hope image that you see here was the big campaign, the visual rhetoric, obviously, of the campaign in 2008. It was designed by artist Frank Shepard Fairley. But we're going to talk about the rhetorical life of this image. We're not going to talk about this image, actually. We're going to talk about not this, because this is not the image. This is the actual art that came from the image. We don't have the image, but basically this is a great story. So George Clooney, any story that starts with George Clooney is pretty cool, right? George Clooney and Senator Barack Obama were at a press conference at the DC National Press Club in April 27, 2006. So this is 2 years before he was even this Hope, Obama Hope image circulated. So George Clooney and Barack Obama are there at a press conference. And the AP photographer, Manny Garcia, he's just doing his job that day. He was sent to cover this particular press conference. Manny Garcia was sent to take a picture of George Clooney. He takes a picture of George Clooney as he was sent to do on assignment, but he also took a picture of Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama's image from that night was converted by Frank Shepard Fairley, which is right in front of you. He converted. He's actually a student, as you may or may not know, Rhode Island student. He's at RISD, was at RISD, sorry. And he took Garcia's image and turned it into the Obama Hope, the now famous Obama Hope image that led the campaign. Now, here's the thing about the rhetorical life of that image that Manny Garcia took that night at the press club. By 2015, there were more than 2 million renditions on websites, tattoos, walls, protest signs of this Obama Hope image. Now, that's why we have to talk about things in terms of the rhetorical life of an image, because it does not do it justice in terms of influence, change in thinking, and uses if we just talk about that picture that Manny Garcia took, or even if we just stop it at Shepard Fairey's initial Hope image. But all of the various uses of that one image is important to discuss. So Lori Grease says artifacts do live on beyond their initial moments of production and delivery. And during circulation, material artifacts generate traceable consequences in their wake, which contribute to their ongoing rhetoricity. We just saw that. Traceable. Traceable. All of these people use that same image to put out a different message. All 8 of those messages are different. And they all of them are making a very different statement, altering thought, possibly in very different ways. But that one image created by Garcia was circulated that many times by 2015. Movement of visual rhetoric is the way images provoke, attract, and align with other things and people. So that image of Manny's Garcia, it encountered many organizations, many causes, many events. Manny Garcia's image provoked, attracted, and aligned with other things and people. The way an image complements, cooperates, and counters in different spaces. So also it can be used to say the opposite of what it was intended to say. So 2 things that she talks about are stationary examination of visual rhetoric, which is important for us to think about because it's what we typically do or what is most often done. So stationary examination of visual rhetoric is this idea that visual things, they do persuade, they do make arguments, but they're stable. You think of them as they have the ability to establish subjectivity, but they're very stable. You see a picture in a frame and you see it as a thing that's stuck in the frame. But in motion examination of visual rhetoric, especially in public spaces, it investigates multiple contributions of a single image over its lifetime. And when you consider, it's easier to consider visual things as personified, as people moving through spaces and communities and events and causes and concatenations through time and space. They actually have the potential to be moved and to move. Grease says, if we think intuitively and ecologically about rhetoric and commit to creating symmetrical accounts of rhetorical activity, studies of circulation actually do have potential to disclose how much rhetoric unfolds as a complex distributed event. I take you back to this: complex and distributed. Complex and distributed. That's a simplified way of saying we need to consider an image like this Marilyn Monroe image being able to deposit something in the 60s. The image deposited something different to the women's movement in the 70s. It deposited something different, positive or negative, I'm not judging it, in the 80s. It deposited something in the 90s. So it's a distributed event, and as it encountered these different generations, its interpretation and transformation was very different. Thank you. That is the end of research slides number 2.